Imagine if you were a fan of an upcoming video game that is yet to be released. A game that you have finally been waiting to play. You're full of joy and excitement, waiting for the day finally to come. You're waiting, and waiting. And suddenly, that day finally comes. Your new, soon-to-be favorite game has just been released. Now, if you want to buy it, where would you go? Well, to your local video game store, of course. And when you buy it, what would you do with it first? You'd stare at the glorious box art, read what the game is about on the back of the package, and unbox it when you get home. If you were a gamer between the 1980s and early 2010s, you probably experienced this in your life. It was such a cool experience, right? Well, thanks to digital distribution services such as Steam, PlayStation Network, and Nintendo eShop, you do not have to experience that anymore. You can instead download a game online. Are there benefits to this change? Well, definitely. The price will probably come to your mind first. Cough, Nintendo, cough, is the exception. Steam games at least have solid prices. Now, you may be wondering, are physical games a relic of the past, a collector's item, or still a normal thing to buy these days? In order to learn the answers to these questions, we first need to go back to the period where it all started. The golden age of arcade games and the birth of the home console industry are commonly associated with the 1980s. This period laid the groundwork for modern gaming by establishing genres, mascots, and gameplay mechanics that still exist today. Arcades were booming with iconic titles such as Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and Space Invaders, attracting many players worldwide. At the same time, home consoles like the Atari 2600 and the Nintendo Entertainment System brought gaming into people's living rooms. What these consoles introduced were game cartridges, a durable plug-and-play media that made it easy for players to switch games without needing any technical knowledge. This is perfect, you may say. And yes, it was indeed, especially for home use, considering that unlike floppy disks, they didn't require installation. What about the game packaging? Well, during this era it was incredibly important for marketing imagination. The box art often depicted epic, cinematic scenes, even though the in-game graphics were minimal. This artistic contrast added mystery and excitement. Most cartridges also came with printed manuals that did far more than explain controls. They often introduced the story, characters, enemies, and items in the game. For example, The Legend of Zelda for the NES came with a golden cartridge and a detailed map and instructions, creating an immersive offline adventure. As technology progressed, cartridge sizes increased in capacity, allowing for more complex games with better graphics and sounds. However, by the late 1990s, cartridges were phased out in favor of optical discs, which were cheaper to produce and could store more data. While home consoles thrived on cartridges, PC games in the 1980s and early 1990s were primarily distributed on the 5.25-inch and later 3.5-inch floppy disks. These games often came in large cardboard boxes, which became famous for their unique sizes and contents. Unlike console games, which were plug-and-play, PC games typically required installation from one or more floppy disks, a process that could take several minutes and sometimes required disk swapping mid-installation. Because early games were basic, like their console counterparts, developers leaned heavily on physical materials to create atmosphere and immersion. Many games included elaborate manuals, novellas, or physical props known as feelies. For example, Infocom text adventure games came with replica artifacts like fake letters and maps that tied into the story, a clever way to make the experience more vivid and also deter piracy. Floppy disks had very limited storage, less than 1.5 megabytes, so games had to be incredibly efficient with space. Developers used tricks like procedural generation or minimalist design to work with tight constraints. Eventually, as games grew in size and complexity, floppy disks gave way to CD-ROMs, which offered hundreds of megabytes of space and enabled the rise of full-motion video, voice acting, and multimedia elements. Today, both cartridges and floppy disks have become prized relics among retro game collectors. They're not just seen as functional media, but as physical links to game history. A boxed NES cartridge, a stack of Amiga floppies, or a PC Big Box release from the early 1990s carries with it more than just nostalgia. It represents a specific moment in the evolution of the industry. Many of these games were never released digitally or exist in versions that are stripped of their original context and packaging. The unboxing experience was even better. It would start with the box itself, often larger and more colorful than what we see today. These boxes featured hand-painted or airbrushed artwork, promising epic adventures, heroic quests, or dark, mysterious worlds. Inside, players would find these thick instruction manuals filled with background lore, character descriptions, and gameplay hints. Many of these manuals were beautifully illustrated, turning even the most basic controls into part of the world building. For certain games, the extras went even further. Titles like Earthbound for the SNES came bundled with full strategy guides and scratch and sniff cards tied to in-game locations. These physical items weren't just marketing gimmicks, they were extensions of the game world, and they made players feel like they were part of something larger. As I've mentioned already, cartridges and floppy disks started to die out in the 1990s. They were ultimately replaced by CD-ROMs. Compared to floppy disks and cartridges, CDs offered a staggering amount of storage space, around 650 megabytes per disk, which was revolutionary at the time. Packaging remained mostly similar. They were still present in the form of large cardboard boxes, often including thick manuals, quick reference cards, and sometimes bonus content like soundtracks or behind-the-scenes discs. Games like Myst, Diablo, or The Seventh Guest not only showcased the multimedia capabilities of the CD-ROM, but also helped define the unboxing experience of the mid-90s. However, as the decade progressed and optical media became the standard, game packaging began to shrink and standardize. By the early 2000s, DVD cases replaced the bulky boxes for most PC and console games. These plastic cases were slimmer, more durable, and cheaper to produce and ship. They typically included a full-color insert with a box art, a disc or two, and a small manual tucked inside. While this move was efficient and modern, many fans felt it marked the end of the more extravagant tactile unboxing rituals that helped to define the earlier decades. Despite the streamlined look, there was still care put into presentation. Special editions and collector's versions kept the spirit of the big box alive, offering steel cases, art books, figurines, and elaborate packaging to those willing to pay a premium. These special releases started with PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube, and continued into the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 generations. The transition to DVD cases also coincided with a growing emphasis on global branding or uniformity. Console manufacturers began enforcing packaging guidelines that ensured that every game case followed a similar format. Logos in the same place, standardized case size and spine layout, helping retail shelves look more organized but also losing some of the eccentricity that characterized earlier generations. By the late 2000s, early 2010s, digital distribution platforms such as Steam, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and Nintendo eShop began to overtake physical sales, and with that shift, the content side physical boxes started to diminish. With high-speed internet becoming more common, hard drive space expanding, downloading games became easier and more convenient than ever before. This digital takeover promised speed, affordability, and accessibility, and for many, it delivered. There were clear advantages to this digital revolution. Gone were the days of driving to the store or waiting for a game to ship. Players could now download a game the moment it was released, often even preloading it before launch. Digital sales and bundle deals lowered the cost of acquiring games significantly, making it possible to buy entire collections for the price of a single retail title. As for smaller indie developers, digital storefronts opened the door to global audiences, bypassing the need for expensive production and retail distribution. But as games became increasingly intangible, so too did our ownership of them. Unlike physical copies, which you could hold, lend or sell, digital games exist on company servers and rely on licenses that can be revoked or expire. You don't truly own a digital game in the same way, you're purchasing access. If a platform goes offline or a game is delisted, it can vanish from your library entirely. A stark example of this was Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, which was removed from digital storefronts in 2014 due to licensing issues. It remained unavailable for 6 years, leaving those who hadn't downloaded before its removal with no legal way to play it. Another infamous case was PT, the demo for Hideo Kojima's cancelled Silent Hills project. After the game was scrapped, PT was completely removed from the PlayStation Store, effectively erasing it from existence. Compare this to physical era, where a disc or cartridge gave you permanent access to the game, no internet, account or server required. Many games from this era would even require you to insert the disc into your PC or console as a form of DRM. Without the disc, the game wouldn't run, but as long as it had it, the game was yours. No one could take it away. In the modern era, major companies like Nintendo and Sony are increasingly moving away from the physical media. For example, rumors around the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 suggest that some physical game cards might not contain the full game at all. Instead, they may simply allow the player to download the game from the internet. While digital distribution is undeniably the future, driven by convenience, reduced production costs, and ease of access, it comes with a cost, a loss of permanence, collectability and personal control. There is a certain magic in holding a physical game. The smell of the printed manual, the texture of the box, the vibrant cover art. These things are irreplaceable in a digital form. They evoke nostalgia and emotion and serve as a physical archive of game's evolution. But as we move deeper into the digital age, it's clear that the future is shifting away from physical media. So, will everything become digital in the future? Most likely, at least in the mainstream. The convenience, cost efficiency, and speed of digital distribution are hard to compete with, but the physical media will never disappear entirely. It will survive as a niche, as a collector's market, and as a form of cultural preservation. Just like vinyl records in music or film reels in cinema, physical video games will remain a treasured part of gaming heritage, cared for by passionate communities who understand their value. And that's it for today's video. Subscribe if you want. I hope that you like it and learned something new. This video was very fun to write. The next video will come next Friday as usual. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye.